Hello, the topic this week is seeing between the lines, meaning, content, and iconography. And you've already had a little bit of a discussion in one of our links about a little bit about iconography and formalism, but this is a little bit more in-depth. So the approaches to art criticism include, right, the terms that we are going to look at are criticism is a term applied to expository and argumentative writing about art or the evaluation or analysis of a work of art. Diaristic, relaxed and informal type of art criticism that reads like a diary entry in which the writer shares observations and feelings about artworks. Formalistic focuses on the objective aspects of the work of art, the elements of style, while ignoring the subjective elements. Contextual, criticism that relates the art to the context of a particular discipline, such as psychology and sociology. So contextual art criticism includes psychoanalytical. This delves into the subconscious of the artist and seeks to understand her art production based on psychoanalysis and, they, them also. Ideological is concerned with the ideas and values on which a particular political or social system is based. So we have Marxist ideologies, which are concerned with social relationship and economic issues. A feminist approach based upon the socio-political philosophy that women deserve rights and opportunities equal to those of men. Multicultural discusses the diverse ethnic and cultural orientations of people as depicted in art. So when we look at iconography, we are looking at the meaning of the subject matter, the emphasis on content over form. Literally, it means image writing. So the artist is telling you a story, or the image itself does. There's an art historian called Panoski, and he divides the approach to iconography into 3 levels: the pre-iconographic or primary or natural subject matter, the secondary or the level of convention and precedent, and then the intrinsic meaning of the image. Iconology. We have the science of imagery that refers to the study of a larger program in which to which the work belongs. So Gombrich, this is another art historian, defines iconology as the reconstruction of the entire program and the interest in the context, which can include cultural as well as an artistic setting. And I will be showing you an example of a chapel that has what Gombrich would describe as the iconology, which is the entire program. So let's look at this first work. And this is a good work to talk about iconography. So this is by Jan van Eyck. This is the Arnolfini portrait, 1434, oil on canvas. A lot of people attribute the invention of oil painting to Jan van Eyck, and it's possibly a myth, but he was certainly one of the people that used it the first. And he was very talented in terms of oil painting. He created very small, meticulous canvases, and he is said to have painted with a one-haired brush. So when you look at these, they're quite small and detailed, and they fall into the category of Northern Renaissance art, which is a problematic category. A lot of art historians have advocated for changing that name because the Renaissance is particular to Italy, and a lot of the characteristics are not seen in Northern art. But if we were to categorize these characteristics, they include detailed interiors that we comb through for meaning. So everything in the painting has a specific meaning. This was patronized. That means a patron paid for this. And it's called the Arnolfini portrait because the patron is Giovanni Arnolfini and his wife, Giovanna. And they're Italian. And it's a double portrait in an interior setting. It's a domestic setting, meaning they're in their house, and they're not only in their house, they're in their bedroom. And there's been lots of theories behind this artwork. And I'll go over a couple, but if we were looking at it from different points of view, right, the original points of view is that it's religious and it has to do with religious iconography. You can look at it from a Marxist point of view about their economic wealth, right? And even feminist art historians can look at this from a feminist point of view. So we'll look at it in a couple ways and we'll go through. So they're in an interior setting. Notice that they're grasping hands. He is raising his hand in a gesture, right, of whether it be promise, right, or sort of swearing in. And she's grasping her clothes, her very large dress. She's grasping it with her left hand. And we have that they're in this domestic interior. We have the bed. We have a chandelier, a mirror in the back, a window. Notice that he has taken his shoes off. There's some fruit by the window ledge, and then there's a little doggy in the front. So when we look at this, art historians of the North, especially early on, art historians would be going through each element in the painting and attributing some sort of significance to it. And we'll go through and look at it. So here's the window, and a lot of people talked about the window and the garden beyond. You can see barely there's some foliage. That this garden beyond meant her fertility, her virginity, and that this was a wedding portrait, and that he's having his hand raised in the form of basically swearing, "I will marry you." And there's been lots of back and forth between whether that is true or not. So I'll give you some other options. But do notice his very wealthy fur. It just happens that the Arnolfinis were in Flanders, where Jan van Eyck is from. And even though they were Italian, they were in charge of importation and exportation of goods. So that's how they were wealthy. And it's particularly important to keep this in mind if we're looking at a Marxist reading of this. So a Marxist reading of the fur would be that they're very wealthy and they're showing off their wealth. In this scene, you can see again the image of the wife, Giovanna, and she has a very expensive lace. She has a hairdo that's very much so something somebody would do for you. You would have to have help to make this hairdo happen. Notice that she has rings on her fingers and she's clasping her dress up. And then you have the details of the bed. Then here you have their clasping the hands. Some art historians have argued that instead of a marriage, it is in fact a power of attorney, that he is leaving town and leaving her in charge of their economic welfare. So that's the new reading of it. The fruit in the window have again everything from because it's oranges, from the sorrows of the Virgin and fertility, to a most recent reading, which I like, that these are specifically oranges, very much so mandarin oranges, right? Similar to like the little clementines, really, is what I would call them, that would be imported from Spain. The shoes, a lot of people have argued that they're on hollow, basically holy ground, and that they have to take their shoes off for this process of marriage. Other people simply argue, well, like everybody else, he has to take his dirty shoes off before entering his bedroom. So think about art history as these multiple levels of meaning that can be carried in to objects. So she also has her shoes off, right? So is it because they're in this intimate setting and they're getting married, or is it simply because they're in the bedroom and they took their shoes off? So everything has a meaning, but it's not a fixed meaning. I want you to look at the very cute Affenpinscher. So originally, when we looked at this work of art, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, they would say, oh, it's a symbol of fidelity and their love, Fido. From a Marxist point of view, this is an Affenpinscher, which is a dog that has to be imported. It's also, if you know and you have a little dog, dogs are expensive, right? After the vet tells you it's $500, you're looking at yourself thinking, I really love this dog, so I can spend all this money. So imagine how much a dog costs in this time period to maintain. Excuse me. Another important aspect of the painting has been the mirror and then the chandelier. So, for example, that thing that looks like a whisk, right? That's basically a duster on the right. Some people have said it's to ward off the devil. And if you think about it, they're very clean people. If they take off their shoes, well, maybe they just use this to dust. You know, it can have just a face value meaning. You have the beads of the rosary and the chandelier. If you look at the larger image, you'll see that one of the candles is lit. And some people have said that is the eye of God looking over them. But these are people that are wealthy, and they're wealthy perhaps because they just would light one candle at the same time, right? They were frugal. So there's multiple meanings. One of them that's really interesting, an aspect of this work, is that you have in the back Johannes van Eyck was here. That's what it says, and it says the date. So the fact that it says he was here is important because he was a witness to this scene. So that you see reflected in the mirror. And in the mirror around it, you have these little vignettes that are the Passion of Christ, the various stages of the Passion of Christ, with the top one being Christ on the cross. And you can look at it in this detail. So we have a tendency to think that in this reflection, you would see the person in red is John van Eyck, and the person in blue is an additional witness. So that's why in the beginning of time, right, when this work was looked at by art historians, they thought it was a marriage because there's the swearing to one another, there's two witnesses. But most people now think it's a power of attorney, and that in his absence, she will take over their financial papers, which is common in Flanders. A lot of women in the north had a lot of power in this way. So I'm going to go back and show you the figure of the female. So I had a lot of students that would always ask me, is she pregnant? Is she pregnant? I would say, well, if this is a marriage portrait, she's not pregnant. It would be impossible. They would not be, such a wealthy family would not be showing off the fact that she's pregnant and unwed. So if you look at Jan van Eyck, this is a body type he has where he has the woman with a belly, and you have that in his altar pieces when he shows Eve specifically. She has like a little pot belly, promising she'll be fertile. So whether she's pregnant or not, let's put it this way. If she were pregnant, it can't be a marriage portrait. They would in no way, shape, or form be getting married, and they would certainly not be publicizing it. So if she is pregnant, then we have to say it is a power of attorney, and he is conferring power to her. So here you can see a little better the candle. So I'll let you think, are they frugal people and that at the same time import clementines and have a very expensive dog? Is it a combination of things? Do you have some religious imagery and the eye of God seeing over them? Or is it a display of their wealth? And these are things to think about as art historians, as artists, and we can also have multiple meanings. So I'll let you think about that. And of course, the Affenpinscher is the best, isn't he? He's so cute. Here's a little bit more of a detail of the room inside. And we really don't know who that additional figure is, but we certainly know that this was an important work in the sense that he signed his name and said he was present for this work. And you can go see this in the National Gallery in London. So let's look at another work. So this is the Arena Chapel, and it's by Giotto, and it's in Padua. And this is a good example of how different elements come together in a program, which is iconology. This particular work, the Giotto is said to be not only the painter, but the sculptor and also the architect. So I think of the Arena Chapel as a portfolio for Giotto. And this is how you write everything down. This is called the Arena Chapel, and this is the patron Enrico Scrovegni. in Padua, Italy in 1303 to 6, and it's a fresco. And the entire chapel is painted by Giotto. Notice it has a blue ceiling, like a blue sky. And then what we call in the part of the vaulting, we have some medallions there that are painted. And then from below, we have registers. And this is looking into the altar, and you have all these registers. At the bottom, you have gray and white painting. It's called grisaille. The technique is grisaille. I'm sure you've heard of this. And then we have different scenes from the life of Christ, the life of the Virgin, and I'll show you what the program looks like. The door where you're entering from is the same door you would be exiting, and that has the last judgment scene. So here's the locations of the frescoes in the Arena Chapel. You have scenes from the life of Joachim, scenes from the life of the Virgin that are in green, scenes of the life of Christ, which are in blue, and then the 7 virtues and 7 vices that are done in this grisaille technique, and they're on the bottom, or what's called the dado. And you don't have to know that, but it's called the dado, the lower section of the chapel. I'm going to show you some of these details, and here you can see those lovely vices and virtues, and they're very innovative, and that's why I see it as a portfolio. So those of you that make electric portfolios or e-portfolios now, or make paper ones, think of Giotto sort of advertising all the things he could do. So he could do grisaille, he can be an architect, he can be a sculptor, he can paint. He also has a couple still lives in here, and you can go through. They have wonderful tours of this. And here's the other side with everything located where it goes. And he also has decorative elements like the blue sky with the stars. The fresco is not in the best state of conservation, simply because he used different fresco techniques. He used dry fresco with wet fresco. If you know fresco, basically you're mixing pigment with plaster and applying it very rapidly. Typically you would apply 1 day at a time. So you would do the drawings and the mixture of the pigments, and he would do different sections 1 day at a time. That's called a giornata in Italian. And what you see that has come off is the dry fresco that is not mixed with the pigments, and it has a tendency to come off. So look at this nativity scene. We have lots of innovation. This is what we call early Renaissance. We have figures with their back towards us. We have the emotion of the angels, right? The nativity is where Christ is born in the manger. Notice that Joseph is sleeping, again, because he's not really the dad. So iconographically, that's how we explain it, right? That God is the dad, and Joseph is really the stepdad. So he's sleeping, taking a little nap. Notice that the Virgin and baby are inside what appears to be this little manger, okay? We have scenes of, for example, a Last Supper of the life of Christ, and it is very different from other Last Suppers because we have people with their back towards us. And these are things that Giotto does to be innovative, different, new, and to bring us into the work. Notice that Christ is at left here. And then you have St. John the Baptist sleeping, because he's always sleeping and happy to be in the presence of Christ. And you see that even in Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. The adoration of the Magi is when the Magi come visit the baby Jesus, and they bring gifts, right? And you can see the star they followed. You can see the camels. And, you know, Giotto is doing this very expressively, right? The people have expressions, which is new for the period. The visitation, right? In which Anne visits, the Marys basically visit each other, but Saint Anne and Mary visit each other. And then the lamentation, and let's look at the lamentation a little bit. I think it's one of the most telling in terms of the emotion. Look at these angels that are crying and pulling on their cheeks. You have that the picture plane, the tree that is likely to be the the tree of good and evil, right, is the same tree used for the cross of Christ. You have this sharp diagonal that leads you to the lamentation. You have the Marys lamenting over the body of Christ. You have figures with their back towards us. St. John with his arms open, Mary Magdalene at his feet. So it's very emotional scene. And what I think is interesting about this is that you have multiple stories from the Bible and all these registers coming together to form this program. So you have the individual iconography of each work coming together to form what's called the iconology. And I wanted to show you, this is the Last Judgment. The Last Judgment is the last thing you see when you walk out the door, and kind of, reminiscent of lots of medieval churches where you would basically walk through the portal and sort of cleanse yourself of your sin or of your sins. That's really what you're doing here also. So I have a detail that I show you first. This detail shows you the patron of the church, the religious leader of the church, and then this is the church itself. So see how these are personifications, and then this is the arena chapel itself that I showed you in the beginning. So it's a mini version of the church, and the patron is kneeling down and presenting it. And this scene is right here. So notice that scene of the patron with the arena chapel is in the salvation side. Notice that hell is on the other side, right? And you have a devil, that's eating people, you have hell on one side, salvation on the other. You have Christ at center in this mandorla of light. It's called the mandorla, and it's a rainbow mandorla. You have the apostles, you have angels, choirs of angels. And what's interesting, of course, is that the patron locates himself, and of course, Giotto does this for him, in the salvation side. And when we look at the iconology or the program of this chapel, a lot of people don't relate it to the patron, but that's really what it's about. So the patron is Enrico Escrovegni. And Enrico Escrovegni was, excuse me, this Italian merchant, and his dad is included in Dante's Inferno. And when your dad's included in Dante's Inferno, as literally, in hell, you start worrying about your life, right? So he decided that unlike his dad, he would be not a money lender. His dad was a money lender. And he didn't want to end up like his dad in hell by loaning money and then charging it at large interest. So he decided that he was going to change his life, do something different, and with his money, pay for this chapel to atone for the sins of his father, and also just in case he had any sins also, right? He would also include himself just in case, so he wouldn't have to go to hell. So keep this in mind, that works have iconography, and then an entire program can have what we call iconology. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I can certainly post that. I think it's a canto, one of the cantos in Dante's Inferno that includes details about the Scrovegni family, if anybody wants to look at it. It's really interesting. So if you have any questions or concerns, please email me. Have a good one.